Everyone faces giants in life. These giants come in many forms: fear, doubt, insecurity, failure, addiction, or anxiety. Maybe you're facing one of those giants right now, a situation that seems too big, too powerful, or too overwhelming for you to handle. But here's the good news: giants can be defeated. They've been defeated before, and they can be defeated again. The story of David and Goliath is not just a story from the Bible, it's a timeless lesson on how we, too, can overcome the impossible. The story starts with a battle, but not just any battle. On one side of the valley were the Israelites, God's chosen people. On the other side stood the Philistines, their enemies. For 40 days, a giant named Goliath taunted and mocked the Israelite army. Goliath was no ordinary warrior. He was over 9 feet tall, covered in armor, carrying weapons that seemed too large for any normal man to even lift. He challenged Israel to send someone to fight him one-on-one, but no one dared to face him. Goliath's presence alone paralyzed an entire army with fear. Imagine how the soldiers felt, watching this massive warrior mock them, mock their God, and challenge their very existence. Day after day, Goliath stood before them, a giant that seemed unconquerable. How many of us can relate to this? How many of us face our own Goliaths, those situations or problems that seem so big, so intimidating, that we feel helpless in their presence? But then, a young shepherd named David entered the scene. David wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He had simply come to bring food to his brothers, who were part of the Israelite army. But when David arrived, he saw something that no one else in the army saw. While the others saw an unbeatable giant, David saw an opportunity for God to show his power. David didn't see Goliath through the eyes of fear, he saw him through the eyes of faith. While everyone else focused on Goliath's size, his strength, his weapons, and his armor, David focused on something bigger: God's power. He knew that the battle wasn't really between him and Goliath. It was between Goliath and God, and David knew that with God on his side, no giant, no matter how big or powerful, could stand against him. So, David did something extraordinary. He volunteered to fight the giant, and when he stood before King Saul, Saul doubted him. After all, David was just a boy, a shepherd, not a warrior. But David responded by remembering how God had helped him defeat lions and bears while protecting his sheep. If God had been with him then, why wouldn't he be with him now? Here's a key lesson for us. When we face our giants, we need to remember how God has helped us before. We need to remember the victories He's already given us in the past. Too often, we forget those moments and focus only on the problem in front of us. But David knew that if God had been faithful before, He would be faithful again. So, David went out to meet Goliath, not with armor or a sword, but with 5 smooth stones and a sling. Goliath laughed when he saw David. He mocked him, belittled him, and cursed him. But David's response was simple and filled with faith. He said, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." And with one shot from his sling, David struck Goliath in the forehead, and the giant fell to the ground. A single stone, guided by God, brought down what seemed to be an invincible force. Goliath was defeated. The giant that had terrorized an entire nation for 40 days was brought down by a boy with faith. So, what can we learn from David's victory over Goliath? How can this ancient story help us overcome the giants we face in our lives today? The first lesson is this: your giant may be big, but God is bigger. Too often, we focus on the size of our problems and forget the power of our God. Goliath was a giant, yes. He was strong, yes. But David knew that no matter how big the giant seemed, God was bigger. In your life, no matter what challenge you're facing, no matter how impossible it seems, remember that God is bigger than your giant. He is stronger than your problem, and He is with you, just as He was with David. The second lesson is, the battle belongs to God. David knew that it wasn't his own strength or skill that would defeat Goliath. He knew that it was God who would give him the victory. When we face the giants in our lives, we often try to fight them on our own, relying on our own strength, our own wisdom, our own resources. But the truth is, the battle isn't ours to fight. It belongs to God. When we trust Him, when we step out in faith, He fights for us. And when God fights, victory is certain. The third lesson: faith is greater than fear. The entire Israelite army was paralyzed by fear. They saw Goliath, and they were too afraid to act. But David saw Goliath, and his faith moved him to action. Fear makes us retreat, but faith pushes us forward. When we let fear control us, we stay stuck in our problems. But when we act in faith, we allow God to work in our situation. David wasn't fearless, he was faithful. He trusted God more than he feared the giant in front of him. The fourth lesson: God uses what you have. David didn't have the armor, the weapons, or the experience of a soldier. He didn't need them. God used what David had, a sling and a few stones. And that was enough. God doesn't need you to have the perfect plan or the perfect resources. He can use what you have right now. Maybe you feel inadequate, like you're not enough to face the challenges in your life. But just like David, God can take what little you have and turn it into a weapon that brings down giants. And finally, the fifth lesson, you are never too small to make a difference. David was the youngest of his brothers, a shepherd boy with no battle experience. Yet, he was the one God used to deliver Israel. You might feel small or insignificant. You might feel like you don't have what it takes to overcome the giant in front of you. But just like David, God has a plan for you. He sees what others don't see, and he can use you in ways you never imagined. So, the next time you face a giant in your life, remember David. Remember that no matter how big or intimidating your giant seems, God is with you. He's bigger, stronger, and ready to fight for you. All he asks is that you step forward in faith, just as David did. What giant are you facing today? Is it fear, doubt, a financial struggle, a broken relationship? Whatever it is, I encourage you to see it through the eyes of faith. Don't focus on the size of the problem. Focus on the size of your God. Step forward in faith, trust in his power, and watch as he brings the giant down. If this message has encouraged you, if you're ready to face your giants with the same faith that David had, I invite you to join us on this journey. Subscribe to this channel, and let's continue to walk in faith together. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos as we explore more stories of faith, hope, and God's power to overcome the impossible. You don't have to face your giants alone. God is with you, and so are we. Let's defeat those giants together.